Hi, and welcome back to TubaFix. I'm Nathan. On today's program, we have a lot of fun stuff to go through. It's prototyping part 2. As I discussed before, prototyping is every engineer's primary tool in trying to figure out how to solve a problem, right? In this particular video, I go through the continuation of the prototype that I started the time before. If you remember right, I pretty much screwed it up. We're trying to prototype a tuba valve out of wood. Last time, I started drilling the holes a little bit too early before really understanding exactly their orientation because I used kind of a bad way to measure and place them on the valve. So this time, I'm trying a different technique to mark the holes on the valve and to get them placed right. The video is a bit longer than normal, but I go through an awful lot of the process, and I want you to come along with me. At the end, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised as to how it turns out. So, let's jump into it.
I started drilling the first hole into the dowel and immediately realized that I was probably utterly incorrect in terms of the hole placement on that dowel. So I've been thinking a lot about how I'm going to replicate these holes and how I'm going to copy the pattern. I have an idea, and it involves, at least at this point, wrapping a piece of paper basically around the valve, punching out where the holes are, eventually cutting out where the holes are, then wrapping them around the dowel so I can transfer the pattern directly. It's probably something I should have tried the first time, but I didn't, so here we are. You can observe how my elementary cutting skills have been preserved over the years. So now I'm going to wrap the paper around here. But my father would say we're not building a piano. However, in this particular case, we are building a tuba. So we have to try be a little more judicious than kind of cut it nearby and call it good. So now you can see we have the paper wrapped piston. You can already see the indentations from the valves. So I'm going to kind of make those a little more pronounced here. So kind of see where they are. Oh. So take a pencil and kind of highlight those in like this. Just generally speaking. So after I wrapped it around the cylinder and marked out where the holes were going to be, I took the paper back off and cut out the holes. And then placed it back onto the cylinder. See? It's got holes. So now what I'm doing is I'm taking the pencil and shading the holes in onto the wood. And I expect the edges to be rough, quite literally. And I expect this model to be rough. That's okay. The reason is twofold. One, because it's not going to be wood when it's done. And number two is because I'm going to have to actually model this in something not wood. And certainly not paper. So I'm going to have to find a different methodology to do the final transfer of these holes onto metal when I get that far. Now, it may be something similar to what I'm doing now, just not quite with such Crayola accuracy of filling in holes. It may be something akin to creating some sort of a plasticized pattern that I can then transfer onto the metal and therefore drill out, or something akin to that. See? So now we have holes. So now I'm going to make some markings on here because I need to indicate, based on the original valve, exactly where those holes go and where the placement of everything is, and then I can kind of proceed from there. So on the original valve, we have a couple of routings to look at. So if we look at here, we have this hole here. It goes up and out here. We have this hole here that goes straight through to this one. And then we have this one here that actually goes all the way up and comes out here. So you can imagine there's some bent tubing. And there's a tube that goes like this. And then there's a tube that pretty much goes straight. So what I've done on our dowel model to replicate this is I've numbered them. So hole number 1 right here goes through to hole number 1 right here. Hole number 2 right there goes down and through to hole number 2. And right over here, hole number 3 goes straight through to hole number 3. I do want to point out one thing that I noticed on my drill press, because I think this is hilarious. On the warning label. Point number 3, do not wear gloves, necktie, jewelry, or loose clothing. Yes, all good suggestions except necktie? Who exactly is wearing a necktie while you're using a drill press? Alright, well, I've gone and fitted the drill press with like a 1/2 inch bit, because that's not quite the hole size, but it's close. And so I figure I can get somewhat close to what I actually need to drill in here.
To the time-lapse machine!
And there you have it. 3 drilled through to 3. It's not the cleanest hole in the world, but it met in the middle, which is a success. And it's certainly not terrible considering the thin wall on this side. I thought that's really rather good, to be honest. So, after some rather interesting drilling, I have 3 holes in my wood dowel. 1, 2, 3, with a little cleanup to do. Some sanding, some cutting, etc. Alright, now that we have our holes drilled, need to do a little editing to it with a utility knife to kind of carve out the edges just a little bit. So now what we really need to do before we can try putting this in the instrument and playing it is we need to find the center of the valve, and then from that center find out where we need to put the valve stem. This is a Frankenstein version, a poor replica of this valve. If you look, how awful is that, right? There is some craftsman watching this video who's going to be just mortified. I apologize ahead of time. So the next thing we need to do is we actually need to get a valve stem onto this wood valve so we can push it down and play it, correct? So I don't have an extra one of these. These are ones that this was missing from the original. And so what I'm looking at is I'm looking at a replacement of some sort, at least temporary. This screw is roughly the right length, especially when I look at the countersink into the wood. So I think this is going to work out well. And I've selected a drill bit to be able to drill in and get the depth set correctly and pilot the hole so that I don't split the wood. Alright, so we're going to need a valve top cap for the valve casing. So I took off the first valve cap and figure I'll replicate it in cardboard. Cardboard is universal. It's nice, it's easy to cut, and it's plentiful. And if you screw it up, there's always plenty more. There, that's roughly correct. One of the features with these valves is that there is a valve guide. It's this little nub right there, you can see. And that slots into the inner side of the casing on the tuba. That ensures that the valve doesn't turn this direction while you're playing it up and down. This little stub sticks out only a fraction of an inch. It's about 1 millimeter out, give or take, and it's a couple millimeters wide. It's really not much, but it's enough to slot into that groove. So after a good amount of work, this is what I end up with. So I have the makeshift valve with the valve guide, neatly made out of PVC, attached to the side of the piston there. So right in the right spot. Very happy about this. This took a lot of work, actually, way more than I expected. Turns out wood glue, not so good for this sort of operation. Ended up turning to Gorilla Glue. Had to wait a couple days, let it set up, and then continue to carve it down with a utility knife until I got actually down to the couple millimeters that it actually needs to be in order to guide it on there. So, end result is that when I insert the piston into the third valve casing, look at that, it doesn't wiggle. There's no lateral movement on it. It goes up and down like it ought to. The spring is not inside right now, but we'll grab one here. I got the new springs right here. We'll put that into place, slide the valve guide, and look at that beautiful valve action. I am so happy. That is just fantastic. So the next thing we have to do is to put the valve cap on. And this, dear viewer, is the very first time that I'm going to try playing my prototype valve. I have not tested it ahead of time. You know, sometimes in these videos you're like, oh, he played it ahead of time, so he knew it was going to happen. In this particular case, no. I haven't played a single note on this yet. I haven't the faintest idea what's going to happen. I'm really, really curious, and it should be an interesting experiment, because so this could be a complete and utter failure. But we'll see. Well, it's better already, because I can make an even better tone than I used to. There's some rattle in somewhere in here. We got some loose parts, I strongly suspect, so there's a little bit of rattle, but that's not to deter from the tone quality. I am so happy. The redneck valve actually rather works. There's a definite place where it works and where it doesn't work. And there may be some leakage around the valve piston itself because it's not actually oiled in here and it's a significant diameter. The tolerances are not what you would find in a production valve, guaranteed. Neither is a tubing. And so there's probably no doubt some leakage going on here and some other stuff. But that is great. I can get a B flat and a C. So I do want to talk about the fact that this valve does actually valve the air as expected. So it's a little muddy, but to the point, when you press the valves, the air should be redirected into these extension tubes, because that's how it works, right? You're extending the length of the tuba and therefore extending the length or setting up a different waveform which is longer and therefore lower, right? And so you should be able to tell that it's working, because you should be able to feel the air coming out of the tube. And so to that point, I took out the third valve slide. If you remember, there's two of them from the assembly video. There's this one and this one. It's a little bit of a different design. It ends actually right here and here. These two are now open. They're normally connected by the slide, which I have taken out. And so when I play, no valves pressed down, no air coming out there. You can hear and feel the air coming out of there. The valve is actually working. It's actually redirecting the air through the tube, which makes me ecstatic. I can't tell you how happy that makes me, because it actually proves that it works. Just like that, kids. Just like that. The hillbilly tuba.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of TubaFix. I'm really happy how it all turned out. On the next video, I'm going to go through some of the parts that I've obtained to try to fix some of the other problems with the tuba, and I want to go over the process that I'm thinking of the next steps, how I'm actually going to create a real workable, lasting tuba valve. Wood is great and all, but it's not going to last long term, and I really need to find a different solution. I have some ideas. Maybe you as a watcher have some ideas as well. So tune in then, and we'll have more conversations about how we're going to fix this little old tuba to be a working instrument. Thanks.